You're listening to the DFO Rundown podcast with Frank Saravalli and Jason Gregor on dailyfaceoff.com.
Welcome to the Daily Faceoff Rundown. I'm Jason Gregor along with Frank Saravalli. We are coming to you live from the woodjerseys.com studios. I got my Boston Bruins wood jersey behind us. And Frank, you got one for your son.
I did, yeah. I let my little guy pick this. The Toronto Maple Leafs, as much as it pains me to have any Leaf gear in this house. Just kidding. It doesn't bother me at all. But I'm happy to hold this up because we've been talking for weeks, Jason, about the attention to detail in these wood jerseys. And it's actually pretty incredible when you see it up close and personal. So not sure if the camera can pick up a little bit more of that than yours behind you. But this is a really cool thing to add to your fan cave.
Yeah, it's awesome. So you can get yours at woodjerseys.com. And until this weekend, until Sunday, you can use the promo code DFODAD15. That's DFODAD15. And you'll get $15 off your order and get in your team. If your dad's a huge fan, wants something to add to the fan cave or wherever he maybe in the garage, you hang it up. It looks pretty cool. So check it out at woodjerseys.com. And we got lots to discuss this week. Brad Larsen, the new head coach of the Columbus Blue Jackets, will join us. I'm looking forward to that because here's a guy who back in 2012 outlined very clearly what his goal was, and that was to be an NHL head coach. And, he did a lot of research on coaches and the timeline and everything. So it should be fun to have him on and kind of how he's going to fill out his assistant coaching staff and such. And what about the other hiring stuff that's going on right now, Frank? We know that Gerard Gallant's with the New York Rangers. What else are you hearing?
Well, we know Rod Brind'Amour, of course, the Jack Adams Award winner on Thursday night, is staying with the Carolina Hurricanes, having signed a contract extension. Not really any surprise there, but we know that there were a number of teams, including the New York Rangers, potentially the Seattle Kraken, and also the Buffalo Sabres that were waiting to see what would happen with Rod Brind'Amour. And I think, when you have a team like the Kraken, they're the team that I think everyone's most interested in who's going to be their first head coach. I think all signs at this point to Rick Tocchet, and he checks so many boxes for that team. Did a lot with a little in Arizona. Has Stanley Cups on his resume as both a player and an assistant coach. And of course has that relationship with not just Ron Francis, but also Jason Botterill in their front office. They worked together in Pittsburgh. Him and Ron Francis won a Stanley Cup together as players. So I think Rick Tocchet makes a lot of sense. It sounds like he's going to have yet another conversation with the Kraken. Not done yet, but I think it's probably safe to say that he's the front runner. There seemed to be some rumor going around earlier in the week that David Quinn was in the mix in Seattle. I think David Quinn is in the mix in Arizona. I think a lot of people are curious what happens there. Mike Van Ryn is another guy, assistant coach from the St. Louis Blues, who previously coached in Tucson and in Kitchener. He's another guy that's down there in Arizona that's been interviewing. And then the last opening is the Buffalo Sabres. Now, I don't know what the Buffalo Sabres are waiting for. It seemed to me like Don Granato was the choice the entire time. They've interviewed seemingly every person under the sun. And, it still points to me that this is Don Granato's job, but I don't think there's been any sort of, movement towards a conclusion on that front. And I just think the longer it drags out, the more it looks like the Sabres, aren't sure what they're doing.
Yeah, I saw a report earlier that I thought was kind of hogwash, suggesting that Tocchet didn't fit into the style of Seattle, and I don't really understand.
What does that mean? There is no style.
Because they felt like that they're going to be heavy analytics, and I'm like, I think people need to stop trying to suggest that there are NHL people who are anti-analytics, and because one team has a group of 4 people in their analytics department and somebody has a group of 2, doesn't mean that more doesn't automatically mean better, right? It's quality over quantity, no question. I think some teams might impact a little bit more, but all you have to do is look at the results on ice. There are some teams that are more heavy, who have a bigger staff in analytics. They're not having guaranteed more success than teams.
What does that even mean? Like, I don't like. Yeah. Anytime the word analytics comes up, my head explodes because it drives me freaking bananas. Most people who are criticizing it don't even understand what it is. It's just information. We talked about this episode 1 of the DFO Rundown. We had Paul Maurice on, and he agreed. He's like, look, I'm just going to start calling it information from now on instead of analytics and see how that changes how people get riled up around the hockey world. There's no analytics camp versus non-analytics camp. It doesn't work that way anymore. It's 2021. You take all of the information that's given to you, you process it, and you use it in some way, whether it's big or small. It impacts every single thing that every team is doing. And it's not analytics. It's just information. It's statistics. It's, it's stuff that happens behind the scenes that people can work towards in terms of trying to answer larger questions that we see around the game with regards to systems, because hockey is so random in nature. It's different than baseball or different than basketball with set plays. So, and that's another thing. I'm glad we're actually talking right now about coaching, because I think if you were to, ask around the four major professional sports leagues, which coaches have the biggest, what sport do coaches have the biggest impact in? Hockey wouldn't be near the top of the list. It would be football, clear and away number one. And then, potentially you could make the argument that it's basketball and then hockey and then baseball. So, there's very few set plays that actually work in hockey. To think that analytics are driving, much of what's happening, I think is short-sighted.
Yeah, I'd actually probably put baseball ahead, because baseball is allowed to start from the exact same point every time. And they do a lot of switching and everything else on different players. And so I think there's even more of it.
But that's almost robotic, is it not?
Yeah. Yeah. At times it can be. Yeah. I think in the concern right now in the NHL when it comes to information is that some of the public stuff, people assume that it's accurate and it's very close to what actually the teams track. And I think that can be misleading, because, I see some charts and you're like, well, that's a chart that doesn't coincide with anything. Like for instance, I saw a chart on Darnell Nurse that had him listed in 1% of penalty killers, meaning that they're, 100% being the best. And he was 1%, yet he plays the most minutes on the third best penalty killing team over the last 2 years.
How is that even possible?
Yeah, it makes no sense. Like, and for people to, I'm like, if you can't look at your model and say, well, maybe this isn't as accurate as I'm saying, like, at least question it. It doesn't make any sense to me.
You're right. The numbers that we're seeing in the public are so totally different than what each individual team is tracking. And the funny thing is, some of what each individual teams are tracking could be different than what the other teams are looking at. So,
yes.
And not only that, but they're also looking for different things. Like, that's really what separates the best departments from, the departments that are the least advanced, is that they're just tracking and going that much deeper on what they're looking for.
Well, the key is taking the information and then figuring out what it's telling you. And all of us, just like, you're going to come up with different analysis and thesis at the end of it, which is great. And obviously the teams that use it better will have success. But the crazy thing about the NHL playoffs is there so much of it. I remember I had Rob Volman on my show, and he talked about how he still believes, after all the tracking, that there's like 38 to 40% of the game is luck that you cannot track.
Yep.
Right.
That's why I was saying about coaching. It has nothing to do with it.
It's complete luck. And what's infuriating for a lot of people is they want to tell themselves that luck, after all our hard work. And I understand that, because that can be a mental mind screw. If you're just like, man, we've done everything right. We prepared all our guys right. And luck can be, you get the wrong injury at the wrong time, right? It can be as simple as a Steve Smith own goal that you could have never prepared for. And that was a team that cost them the potential 5 Stanley Cups in a row. And we know other plays that have gone wrong just on a sheer bad bounce can be the difference in winning a series, because these teams now that are in the final, like, I still think Tampa's the best team, but New York is right there in the games they lose, right? They just lose by a goal, but a goal in the NHL is still a significant margin.
It is. And look, you know what? I think moving forward, the quicker we all recognize how much of a factor luck plays in, like, there's just some things in life and science that aren't explainable. And I think you have to allow for that possibility in hockey as well. And I think the best teams and staffs also do account for that.
I believe I'm compiling another article, because I did mine on defensemen and the size and experience of defensemen, which I
seem to be getting some interesting feedback on that, by the way.
Yeah. And it's what kind of feedback you getting?
Well, no, I tweeted out the link, and it seemed to get a response that, people were saying, okay, so you told us that defensemen are big in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and they win. Like, okay, so what? And I'm like,
it's not just about size though. It's experience is the key. And you, like Colorado, I said before the series, Frank, when your top 4 averaged like, about 150 NHL games and weighed 191 pounds, like history tells us you're not going to win. And so it's not like, that's why I try to use the average, but then you drill down even more when the guys who are playing the most in the NHL playoffs on the blue line, forwards are different, right? Forwards are different. On average, they're smaller, right? There's also 12 of them, but it's just different. Like defending in today's NHL is huge. But I think the other big one is because now I'm looking at goaltenders, Frank, and we see it in the NHL play. If you don't have a goalie, and most of the goalies are homegrown, right? Like you look at Stanley Cup winners, it's drafting and developing their own guys. You got to go back to Boston, in 2011. And then of course, Chicago in 2010 that didn't have the homegrown goalie as their winner.
So that's your next article?
Yeah. And it's just looking, because this year in the draft, there's 2 goalies that are scheduled to go in the first round.
We had Craig Button on, and he said he would be shocked if 2 goalies don't go in the first round. He said you could have 3.
Yeah. And it's like for a long time, I think some teams maybe put off the importance of goaltending because they were like, you can find one later. But man, look at Vasilevsky, right? Look at Price, look at Fleur. There's 3 first rounders, right? 3 first rounders. And then Varlamov, same thing. So you got 4 starting goalies.
4 first rounders. Yeah, in the final 4.
So it's and Sorokin, another good draft pick. So it's something I think the teams that and I think for decades the NHL teams, well, they got goalie coaches. Did they get goalie scouts to really scout the goaltenders? And I think it's such an important position. I believe in the next 10 years, the teams that are best at scouting goalies are the ones that are ultimately going to have success.
But why didn't we I know this sounds like a dumb question to ask, and it's easy to ask it with hindsight, but why did it take so long to get to that point where teams are now developing, they have goaltending departments? It's like, it's such a big impact on the game. And we've known forever how important goaltending is. It's, the number 1 position in the sport, but it's almost like there was a wariness to it because goalies are just different people or goalies are, I don't understand it, so I'm going to park it over here. Well, like why did it take 50 years of evolution to get to this point?
That's a good question, Frank. And we have a guest coming up. We're not confirmed yet, but we got a guest coming up talking about goaltending specifically in the next few weeks of the pod, which will be
what a tease.
Great. Yeah, it'll be great. Now, speaking of guests, today we got the new head coach of the Columbus Blue Jackets. Brad Larsen is going to join us on the pod. And now we are joined by the new head coach of the Columbus Blue Jackets. He, of course, was drafted by the Ottawa Senators and then drafted again in 1997 by the Colorado Avalanche, went to the Stanley Cup final with the Colorado Avalanche in 2002. He also was a member of the Columbus Blue Jackets organization for 11 years, 4 years in their AHL organization, the last 7 as an assistant coach, and now he is their head coach. Brad Larsen joins us. Brad, welcome to the Daily Faceoff Rundown. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Now, before we get to the coaching, and congratulations on that, I want to go back to your start. So you get drafted in 95 by Ottawa. Then your rights got traded to Colorado. You didn't sign with them. You go back in the draft, and they drafted you again. Tell me about that as to, why they didn't sign you and then they drafted you. It must have been a kind of a confusing time for a young guy.
Yeah. Well, you know what? My agent and I at the time, we decided not to sign with them. And it wasn't because we didn't like the organization. They were young. I mean, they were full of talent. It was like the Adam Deadmarsh and Forsberg and all that crew coming in. And I didn't think that I had a chance to make it for about 10 years because they were so talented. So we decided not to sign. It wasn't a money thing there was no hard feelings. It was just, I think we thought a lack of possible opportunity. And so we went back in the draft and they actually warned us. They said, look, if you're available in a spot where we think we could get you, we would draft you again. And, I didn't go to the draft or anything. I was just taking off to go on a trip and I got the phone call and they said, you got redrafted. So by Colorado. And at first I was upset and devastated, but it worked out well being in that organization for 7 years. And, it's funny how things work out.
Yeah, that is very crazy. And I think it's maybe just kind of an introduction to how the NHL is going to be, expect the unexpected a little bit, Brad. And you've been somebody who grounded out in the AHL for a long time and then made it to the NHL. Injuries definitely played a part late in your career. And you had to make a tough decision. You had finished playing the American League. It looked like you were coming back. And then suddenly you retired in August because you got a job in Springfield as the assistant coach. Take us back to that summer and that negotiations. Did you approach them? Did they approach you? How did you go from being a player one year to next year being an assistant coach?
By that point in my career, I'd missed the season before. I got traded to Anaheim from Atlanta. And I missed the whole season. I had double sports hernia surgery. I had hip surgery. It was just kind of a mess going on with my lower body. So got through that, got healthy, and I felt like I'd give it one last crack. And so I played under Kevin Dineen in Portland, Maine, in Buffalo's system. Was a good year, but I could feel it. I knew I was done. My line mates were Paul Byron and Nathan Gerby, and I learned very quickly I couldn't keep up with any of those two. So I knew my time was coming to an end. And so I had thought about coaching since I was a teenager, to be honest with you. Since I was probably 18 or 19, I really enjoyed being around the game, the teaching part of it, the aspect. So, and being injured a lot, like you mentioned before, I was hurt a lot in my career. So every time I got hurt, and being a fringe player as I was, I wasn't a top six forward by any means. I was just kind of hanging on my whole career. So you always come back to what are you passionate about? What do you love to do? And it was always in hockey. I didn't really want to scout or do anything like that. I wanted to be as close to the game as possible. And so I actually started going to coaches clinics before my career was over, and reaching out to other coaches about, what's it going to look like? And everybody had advice where it would be, hey, you might want to learn the video. So even my last year in Portland, Maine, under Kevin, there was a Kevin Collins, who is our strength coach now, was strength coach and video coach for Kevin Dineen in Portland, Maine. And at the end of the season, I asked him, and I'm like, hey, can you just teach me how to cut a tape? So I would go in once or twice a week and for about a month to learn how to cut video, because I knew as an assistant coach, it's going to be required. So by the end of the month, I could do it. I could take a raw game and cut it and sort it and do labels and all that stuff. So I had planned earlier, even when playing, like the old adage says, it's easier to find a job when you have one. So I figured I might as well get rolling now. Right. And it was kind of a tumultuous summer. I'd had testicular cancer. I'd found out right going into playoffs, and which required surgery and then radiation. And I didn't say anything to anybody. I kind of found out right going into playoffs in the minors. We got beat, thank goodness, because then I could move forward. But I knew I was done. I had kind of started to network and get out to send some emails and stuff, personal emails to every GM and every assistant GM. I got some calls back from a couple of teams, and it happened pretty quick, actually. There was two teams involved, and Columbus kind of rose to the forefront there at the end. And I was just grateful that I could retire as a player, because I was done physically and I think mentally too.
Right. It's so rare to hear someone say that, even since they were a teenager, they were really drawn to coaching, especially with a promising career ahead of them as a player. But, you mentioned the teaching part of it. What else about the role drew you in? What, how much of it was systems? How much of it is just people and getting to know guys and what makes them tick? Is it all of it?
Yeah, it's a little bit of everything. I really value the relationship part of it. It's so intriguing to me. And the one thing about this job is every day it's different. Every single day, doesn't matter, head coach, assistant coach, there's a new challenge in front of you, whether it's, even when you're winning, it's how you're going to keep winning. When you're losing, how you're going to get out of it. And then there's everything in between. There's when you're a coach of a group of young men, and there's a lot of different personalities, as you know, and not everybody is coached the same. Not everybody fits into one box. So there's so many moving parts, from the structure part of it to, the individuals to, the special teams to, just the dynamic with your coaching staff and building chemistry there. And so it's the closest you can get to playing without playing, and you're right ice level, you feel the energy, you have some input, you're there to help. To me, that's the most fun as a coach, is when you see a group of men come together. They're passionate, they're inspired, they're working hard for each other. To me, that's the reward. It's not about you as the coach. If anything, you want to stay in the background and let those guys go to work. And when you see them pull together, it's a great experience.
Mm-hmm. I was struck, Brad, in your opening press conference when you were being introduced as coach about just the emotion you had when you were asked about John Tortorella, and it was pretty clear what he meant to you and your family. But one of the toughest things in this sport, I think sometimes, is to go from being an assistant under a head coach to then taking over that same group next season. How do you think things will be different? How do you think things will be the same in Columbus?
Well, yeah, I mean, I could talk for 25 minutes on a guy like Torts and what he's meant to me and my family. When to get the opportunity to come here, and really when I took the assistant job here in Columbus, I wanted to take a step back, believe it or not, and I wanted to see the NHL as an assistant coach, not as a head coach. At that point, I was a head coach in the American League. It was going fairly well. I had 2 good seasons, and we won a couple division titles, and I had a great staff. I had hired Jared Bednar and Nolan Pratt, so we had an outstanding staff, good team. So things were going really well. I sought advice out of, and I'll even tell you the 3 coaches. I talked to Todd McClellan, who I had in junior for 3 years, and he was a guy I have a tremendous amount of respect. And Ken Hitchcock, who kind of mentored me when I first got in, and Mike Babcock, he was a head coach for me in World Juniors, and I was captain of that team. So those are, incredible resources to ask. And I asked them all, should I stay? Should I go? And they all told me to stay in the American League as a head coach. And, if you do things right, you'll be a head coach in a few years. But something in my gut was telling me that's just not the path I wanted to take. I wasn't fast tracking it. I was in no hurry to be a head coach. And quite honestly, I studied all the coaches I looked at, go on Hockey DB or whatever you want, and you see their path. And the ones that lasted are the ones that took their time. They didn't rush into it. They didn't jump levels or jump different experiences. And I live by this statement of you can't substitute experience. It's just you've got to go through stuff, good and bad. And so when I came here, it was to take a step back and be under a staff. And it was Todd Richards, Craig Hartsburg, Ian Clark was a goaltending coach. It was a tremendous staff. And so I got to sit back and I watched the dynamic between management and head coach and different ideas and how they operated. And so it was important for me. And we didn't have the success we wanted. And then Torts came in, and, he inherited me. So it wasn't like he brought me in. I remember sharing with my wife, I'm like, I might get fired here in a week, a day. I don't know. So, but I quickly realized after a week or 2 with Torts that I was excited. I talked to another assistant coach who had worked with him, and he raved about him. He said, "You're going to love him." And he was spot on. He's a guy that's, I think he's very misunderstood by a lot of people. He doesn't let a lot of people in, and he understands that, and I understand why. But the way he cares about his staff, his players, his passion for winning, his drive to make the team better. It's really all about the team. It's never about him. It's never about showing who he is. He every day he wants that team to try and get better, and he's always trying to think of ways to do that. And he has a standard, and I think that's why we see eye to eye, is that this black and white standard, what it looks like, and accountability, and everybody loves that word, but until it's and until it's the actual player. So, but he's very clear on the standard, who it is, doesn't matter who the player is. And so I really enjoyed seeing that, because I believed in those things. I thought that's something that I was very passionate about. So I got to witness it from a guy who's won a Stanley Cup, borderline Hall of Fame guy in probably the NHL, USA Hockey. I'm guessing he's going to get in. So that was really neat for me. But then, like you said, how's it going to be different? Right. Well, for me, it's an easy answer. I'm going to be myself. And I think it's advice I got early was always be true to who you are. And I'm going to do that. Going through the interview process with the Blue Jackets, I promised myself I wouldn't be a salesman. I'm not here to sell you something that I can't deliver on. And so when I went into that, it was just be who you are. And if that's what they're looking for, then you'll get the job. But if not, it's okay. I'll move on. And again, I wasn't chasing the job. I wasn't in a rush, and I feel like I'm ready. But if they didn't see it the same way, it was okay. I'll find a job somewhere. I felt confident in that. So when I got the yes, I'm excited. I get to build a new staff, and we lose a guy like Brad Shaw, who's a tremendous coach, and he's now in Vancouver, and smart man, very, very organized, very good hockey mind. Vancouver's got a real good coach in him. But now I get to surround myself with the people that I think can help this organization, and I'm really looking forward to that.
You came from the American League, and I found an article back in 2012, and you had a plan. You were it seemed very regimented. My goal is to be an NHL head coach, but as you just said, it wasn't going to be a fast track. To have that patience, Brad, is something that a lot of us struggle with. How were you able to always kind of stay on your path and know that, okay, I'm leaving Springfield, even though my mentor said I should probably stay here? How much of that is gut feel? And then when you're there, to just remain, focused and not be distracted by, like Jared Bettner, a guy that you coach with, suddenly he's a head coach, to think that, hey, my time will come. How are you able to remain poised and patient? Or were there challenging times during these last 9 years?
It was easy. I love what I was doing. It was, I was very blessed to be in a situation with an organization that was on the uprise, with a guy I had a tremendous amount of respect. Like Torts grew me every year. That's the thing. You weren't just pigeonholed into one spot, and every year it got more and more on my plate. It was tons of hours and work, but it was so worth it. And it was, we were on the right path. Like we've done some really good things here. So for a guy, like when I see Bedsy go up, I was so excited for him. I can't tell you what, actually I had a few conversations letting that organization know how good he really was. He was a tremendous coach for me. I'm a big believer in surround yourself with the best people possible, and find people way smarter than yourself. And, it's not that hard in my case, but so a guy like Bedsy was what a resource to have. And, he's humble, he works hard. You don't have to micromanage him. He's a guy that you ask for his opinion, he's going to give it. But, and you see what he's doing. I mean, his resume speaks for itself. But when you say a guy like that, if you look at his resume, he put his time in. He didn't just show up and go 2 years East Coast, one in the American League, and get a head job. He put his time in. And, I think it probably took him 13, 14 years to get that head job, and he won a championship. So again, another guy that's put the work in, he put the time in, and look what he's doing now. So to be honest with you, it hasn't been hard at all. And if I wouldn't have got this job, sure, I would have been disappointed, but it would have been exciting that there's a new challenge ahead of me. And again, it's not to fast track this. It's not there's 32 jobs, now, because Seattle's in. And so it's a hard job to get. And there's, it's very humbling. There's so many qualified guys, and, people are asking me, are you nervous? I'm like, no, there's nothing I can do about that. There's so many guys that have more qualifications than me and experience. And if that's what they want, I can't change that. I'm not trying to change their mind. I'm either going to be what they want at this point, or I'm not. So I slept well. I had moments of, I'll say this, and I said it to my wife, it wasn't stress. There was tension, because this interview was very different, because they're wondering how it's going to be different, working with a man and of Torts' stature. And I have so much respect for him and what he's done for me, my family, and this organization. But they're asking me, what am I going to do different? So I feel like I'm arguing against myself a little bit. And I certainly didn't want to put down a man that I have this much respect for. So, and they understood that. But I think what they were searching for is, teams do need a new voice at some point. They don't want the same messaging. They don't want the same meetings. So I understood that, but that was my challenge, is how do I present myself without talking down about someone else, which I believe in a lot of the stuff that we did, and I still do. So I think through the process of the interview, I think they saw it, they felt my passion, my energy, what it's going to look like. But being honest with them, going, look, this isn't going to be an overhaul. I think we've done a lot of great things here. The difference is me. That's who it's going to be. So get to know me. I'm going to build a staff, and I believe that staff's going to be the right fit for this group.
And Brad, so you being an assistant coach at the American League level in the NHL, and of course a head coach. So you talked about how John, kept allowing you to grow and make you better and give you more responsibility. When you're looking for your coach, obviously I think you're going to want a defensive coach. Usually that's, want somebody to run the defense, and that's where what Brad Shaw did. But what type of personality, what are you looking for in your coaching staff, and how close are you to filling it out?
There's one guy I'm fairly far along on, and we'll see where it goes. The other position I'm working on, like, there's been no shortage of calls and emails, and again, there's a lot of qualified people. First and foremost, I'm looking for something different than myself. I bring a certain energy and a passion, and I don't need to hire me. I need something different than me, and it's got to be a good fit. I want men of integrity and character and communicators. I think the game is at a place now where you need to be accessible. You need to be comfortable having conversations with guys daily, not just once a week or once a month. It's this constant feedback that the players are looking for and require. They got to be good teachers of the game, patient. The one thing, this patient endurance, I think is two words that I kind of live by, because we get frustrated as coaches sometimes when they're not executing or doing it. And my earlier version of a coach, I'd get frustrated and mad. And now I look at it through different lenses where I'm going, okay, that's not working with this player X. So what's the next route? Like, okay, we've tried this, maybe he needs a little bit more one-on-one. Maybe it has to be on the ice, literally standing beside him and show him exactly what we need. Get to know him, building trust, building that trust that I have your best interest at heart. I want to win as a team, but I care about you first before the player. And like anything, that takes time. Anything in life that's worth value, whether that's love, friendship, it takes time to build that. And so I want my coaches to embrace that in a different way than I'm going to do it, and challenge me as a head coach and grow me as a head coach also, where I'm sitting in the room and because I'm going to value their opinion. I think I've been in the shoes and I know what it's like, and there's nothing better than when the head coach is listening to you, he's hearing you, and he uses you and he grows you. It's really empowering, and I want to empower my coaches so that we're a true staff and that the players see that.
Right. Up until last season, the Blue Jackets were one of the most consistent teams in the league over the last handful of years. We had Yarmo on a couple months ago to, work through what happened last season. But looking forward, how do you describe where this team is at? Obviously there's going to be changes this summer, the expansion draft, everyone's going to have some form of change. And then everyone's got their eye on the Seth Jones situation. Is it, I think rebuild is probably way too strong of a word. Is refresh a fair way to describe what we may be seeing from the Blue Jackets in the fall?
Well, everybody wants to label it right now, and I'm very hesitant to do that at this point. And, we're going to see what we look like probably mid-August to September, right? So, the Seth Jones situation is the real situation, and we're going to have to deal with it. And we've been through this before here, and so however this plays out, we'll deal with it. We'll move forward, and we all know what we think of Seth Jones. He's a tremendous person, tremendous player. We'd love to have him here. But, as we know, as players get along in their careers and have success, they get rights. And so it's well within his rights to make that decision. And if he goes forward with it, then we have to make a decision as an organization, and then we plan accordingly. So once we get to that August, September, I think we'll have a much clearer picture of where we're going to be at. The thing about, using rebuild, retool, all these terms, it's really just, we want to build a foundation, and so that's going to be a daily process of what it's going to look like as far as structure, as far as our intensity, as far as our practice habits, and that takes time, and we'll see what our team looks like at the end of all these decisions, and then move forward from there.
How do you assess what you got from Patrick Laine last year? Obviously, it comes along after the start of the season, and it's not necessarily the quickest adjustment in terms of meshing everything properly. Mm-hmm. He's an unbelievable talent. He does something that so few players in this league can do, and it seems like he does it so easily at times. How do you, re-engage Patrick Laine and get him back on track?
Well, first of all, I think it'll be a breath of fresh air, like a fresh start for him. It was a whirlwind when you first get traded. I unless you're in those situations, you never know how the player is going to react or what it's going to do to you, how hard it is. He had been in one organization, he gets traded, and even though there's talk, until it happens, it's a really sobering moment where you're going, okay, we need you here tomorrow, and not to mention we're in a pandemic here, not to mention there's no camp. You can't build chemistry, see what the coaching staff's like, the players are like. You're not
moving to a different country. I mean, there's a lot to it.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to hang out with your teammates at all, because everybody's in mass and isolated. So first of all, there's that factor that goes into it. It was a crazy year. There's no fans, so you lose the energy of the game right away. I think that was the biggest thing we all felt. It's just, I remember being in Chicago and the first time we were there, they do the national anthem. Normally you're all excited, even as a coach, you're all fired up, and it's like he ends and it's just thud. You're going, wow, this really is a pandemic year. Like there's no energy in this building. So back to Patty. Tremendous talent. We know that he's got. I think everyone tries to label him too of I've heard lazy and all this. He's not a lazy player. He cares. And I have talked with Patty, and I felt like he was trying to do too much. And so, he had good chemistry with certain players in Winnipeg, so that takes time too. What that's going to look like. So there's so many factors. The thing with him is understanding who he is, what kind of player he's when he's most effective, but not trying to do too much, right? And I think when you come to a new team, you want to impress right away. You want to do all these things, and it snowballed all the wrong way for him. And he's been very accountable to that. I think he knows it's a huge summer for him as far as getting in the best shape. Everybody says the same thing, but it's necessary to be a big man in this league and move up and down the ice. And if you want the minutes, you've got to be in tremendous shape and be competitive, but stay within your skill set, grow on it, of course, but don't try to do stuff that you maybe you're not, I shouldn't say not capable, but it's so far out of your comfort zone. It's being counterproductive. And I felt like that's where his game got, is he was trying so hard and doing things. It's like he wanted to put the whole team on his back. And this is a team sport. You use your teammates and trust they're going to get the job done. And, talking with him, he's very excited to kind of take a breath, get in shape and get back and have a camp and get rolling.
Jay, if I could ask a quick follow, I'm really glad, Brad, you mentioned that, about the narrative that sometimes exists about players. And I think you hit it right on the head with Patrick. Like when I watch him, it's almost like, and then you see his reaction post game sometimes, it's almost like he cares too much. And I don't know if that's possible, but he does put a lot of pressure on himself. And as someone like yourself, who is clearly comfortable in your own skin, do you think there's any part of that you could maybe pass on to him that, sort of helps him, make him feel a little bit more comfortable to the point where he hasn't necessarily figured out that part of the game yet mentally in his own headspace?
Yeah, he's young and it's hard. The problem is when you start the career the way he did and he's firing bullets and scoring goals left and right, the expectations go like this real quick. And that's a lot of pressure on players. And, I never had to deal with that kind of pressure as a player. I was just trying to survive in the league, let alone put up numbers. So I've actually talked to players, and I've talked to a first overall draft pick in the NHL. I've talked to a second overall and asked them those exact questions. What was it like with that kind of pressure? Because I don't know what it's like, and to try and get in their headspace and go, how did you deal with social media? How did you deal with the pressures of being the guy to have to score every night or be the number one defenseman? What is that feeling like? Did you feel the pressure of it? Were you worried? Were you anxious? Did you sleep well? And it's interesting when you talk to the two of them, how the pressures were different, but the same in a lot of aspects also. So I've tried to kind of research that a little bit, and so that I can build a relationship and trying to understand him better of what that feels like, because I don't know what that feels like. I can't pretend to, so that I can offer help. And the one thing that I've shared with a lot of these guys is, whose opinion do you value? I think that to me should be a staple in your life. And there's a lot of opinions out there, from shows to social media to, you're going to hear it if you look for it, and be careful when they're telling you how good you are, because a lot of times you're not as good as you are. And oftentimes you're not nearly as bad as they're telling you are either. So That idea for me is which opinion do you value? That's so important for me to the player, and understanding that, you know, in these walls here, we care about you. We're going to try and help you in every situation we can, but you got to put the work in.
Brad, it's, you know, you mentioned Ken Hitchcock was one of your mentors, and Ken's talked openly about, he feels, you know, to have success as a coach, you got to get on the same page as your best players. You know, I had Dave McGinnis, the head coach of the Bears, now on my show recently, and he joked, he says, "Hey, guess what? The best years of my career is when I had the best players." So, you know, you understand a coach is to a point is only as good as his players. Obviously, you want to try to maximize that. When you look at a coach today and you compare yourself to when you first came in and what you learned, where have you grown the most, do you feel, as a head coach? And was there one thing you've learned in the last decade that maybe you didn't know about coaching that's more important today than maybe you thought it was when you first entered the pro ranks?
Yeah, for myself, you know, like every young coach, when you first come in, I mean, you're gangbusters, right? You're full of juice and energy, and you're going to show everybody how smart you are and how good you are. You know, the one mistake I think I made, and is I was going to dot every I, cross every T. There wasn't going to be any information that they weren't going to get. I remember being in the American League, and this is when I was head coach, and we're playing the Hartford Wolfpack for I think the 12th time of that season. And, you know, I'm showing 25 clips of 5-on-5 video, and, you know, because it makes me feel good as a coach, right? They have all the information. It was so wrong. And when I look back, and it's just too much, I focused on a lot of the wrong things. We had good seasons, but I think I could have helped these players more and put more value in certain areas. So when I got here under Richie, and then even more so under Torts, where the focus was sorely on us all the time, and no senseless meetings, no overkill on it. When we teach, it's about us. We don't worry about the other team. And, you know, obviously there's certain situations of playoffs and things that we'll draw attention to, but at the end of the day, our focus was us. So that's probably the most where I've grown. I think building relationships is way more important than the X's and O's. And that old saying that you hear, you know, they only care what you know, or they only know what you, oh, how am I going to say it now if I say it properly? They only care what you know if they only know that you care. So that's what I'm trying to get across there. Sorry, fellas. But again, it's very simple, but it's a process, and it's a hard thing to do, to build trust, and because there's a lot of moving parts at this level, because there's careers and a lot of money involved and different things and stats. But they have to know you care first before they really care anything that you're doing X's and O's. So if there's one area that I would say I switched gears was valuing the people more and get to know them. I'm an inspired player is a much better player than someone who's just playing like a robot.
Awesome. Frank, can we get to rapid fire?
Yeah, let's do a little rapid fire.
All right,
Yeah.
okay.
Sure.
So Brad, in rapid fire, we like to have a little bit of fun. The only rule is you have to answer the questions.
All right.
Okay. So here we go. We'll start with an easy one. Brad Larsen's cocktail of choice.
Coffee.
Coffee. Ooh, dark. What is straight? What do you drink?
Just black. Yeah.
Just black. Okay. Yeah. Todd McClellan, you mentioned him earlier. He was your junior coach for 3 years. Now you're going to coach against him this year. That'll probably be a thrill for sure. What was your favorite Todd McClellan saying that he used as a coach in Swift Current?
Gosh, like you're going way back. I can't remember sayings. What Todd, I can't think of one. I would tell you if I did. It's not that I'm dodging the question. I just can't think of a Todd McClellan saying.
What was his best or funniest trait you remember as a head coach in junior?
Well, I don't want to be mean to the guy.
Oh, you should be.
Yeah. Todd's got a good sense of humor.
There was some guys that made fun of the size of his hat size.
He does have a huge melon. He does.
Well, I mean, you said it, not me. So there were times where we drew attention to that.
Okay. This is a tough one. You won 2 gold medals, the World Juniors, 96, 97. You have to pick one. Which was a more fun or better experience?
Ooh. Well, the second one I was the captain of, and I don't think it was more fun. I actually, you talk about pressure. We had won 4 in a row, and you didn't want to be the captain that screwed this up. So it was relief. And honestly, Mike Babcock, I think, was in the same boat. We won. I remember sitting on the bench after we won in Switzerland there and looking at each other and just kind of taking a breath. We could finally enjoy it, but we didn't drop the ball. We kept the ball rolling. It was 5 in a row, and so that was very gratifying. It was you get named captain, and you're excited, and then reality hits. You're like, oh, we can't screw this up. We got to make sure we win. There's a lot of pressure that comes in. So it was relief and an exciting time.
What do you correlate between being a captain of a World Juniors, where you're going to bring together a group very quickly? What skill set there is going to help you as a coach?
Well, it's a lot of the same intangibles as a captain. What I learned was, and again, I think if I could be a leader now, and what I've learned in this, I think I'd be a much better leader. But you learn that your words are great, but really your actions tell me everything. And so I want to get to know the players. I want to talk to them. But once we walk out of this room in the next month or 2 months and whatever we've talked about, the action is the most important thing. It's going to tell me everything. If you value it, you're going to do it. And so that's something that I've taken as a leader, and I'm going to, bring as a coach as well.
Now I can ask this question, Brad, because if you look at my dome, so I look at there, you got a lot of stubble on there. Are you premature thinking the dream is over, or do you just like going down to the wood?
When I shaved my head in 2005, it was lockout year. I was with the Chicago Wolves, and I decided I'm going to shave it, grow a beard, and we went to the finals that year. And I have pretty thick hair. If you see, I got wrinkles in my head too. I'm going to set the record straight. I don't shave lines in my head, and I don't do designs. This is what you get. This is it. So we can squash that rumor right away. I'm not that creative with my hair, but I shaved it and I loved it. There was no more product or gel or any of that stuff, and I said, that's it. So the last time I grew my hair out was before the playoffs in 2005. And I've always shaved it.
Oh, I love it. So because I know you're good friends, if we came to training camp in September and you have to do a conditioning test, who's having better results, Brad Larsen or Jared Bednar?
So are we talking on ice, like conditioning as far as like cardio?
Yeah, you got to do
the all day long. See, Betsy's all about the weights and looking big and buff, and you can tell him that too. He hates cardio, and if he says he does it, he's a liar. He might walk on the treadmill a little bit, but he's like, he's all into his bulking phase and trying to get big arms and stuff. So yeah, all day long, I'd bury it.
Okay. Have you ever jumped when the cannon went off?
Oh yeah. When I first got the job. And the best part about it is Torts did the exact same thing. When he got the job, he was to my right, and that thing went off. He almost jumped out of his shoes the first 3 times. It was hilarious. But yeah, it gets you when the last thing you're thinking about when you first get to a new team is the cannon going off, and it gets you. It's intense.
Oh, so I'm guessing you'll talk to your video guys to ensure that whoever your new assistant coaches are for opening night, somebody's going to video them for their first goal, and then you show that in the highlight reel in the video room later on.
Yeah, ISO cam for sure, and I don't want to draw any attention to it because they will jump. You can't avoid it.
Brad, thank you so much for joining us. Congratulations. I really loved your whole outlook. It seemed like you're somebody who's had a goal in mind, didn't feel that the need to fast track it, and really comfortable in who you are. And I wish you all the best of success in Columbus, and we look forward to having you back on the pod down the road.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Brad.
You bet.
Brad Larsen, he was outstanding. Like I'm listening to him talk, Frank, and I could just
refreshing.
He's refreshing, and he's so direct in his approach. I can see how, without him even coaching an NHL game yet, he's going to have a reputation of a player's guy, because the players, I think, are going to respect that he's just so authentic.
I'm so glad you said authentic, because that's the word that was on the tip of my tongue. That's what it was. It was genuine. It was, this is who I am. I'm not going to try and be something that I'm not. And it'll be real easy to tell if that happens. And so that's one of those things, that honesty, having been through it, as he called it, a fringe player. I think that just goes such a long way.
Yeah. And you know what? People will look and say, I didn't play a lot, but he played in some crucial situations. We talked to him off air about the time in Colorado, that was Detroit, Colorado series. My goodness. So I'm really intrigued to see who he hires and how they approach the Seth Jones trade, because if Seth Jones is going to free agency, obviously they're going to move him, no question. So it's just a matter of I think that's Yarmo's job more than the head coach, but they'll probably have some say a little bit on, hey, what do you about this guy that you think you're getting? Because I think Seth Jones, like we talked about Patrick Laine's reputation, and I think it's completely misguided that he doesn't work hard. I don't like that at all. And some suggestions that Seth Jones, from people who look at certain information and data, that he's not that good. I will strongly disagree. I think Seth Jones is a really good defenseman who there's a lot of teams who want him, especially as a right shot defenseman, just kind of entering those prime years of a defenseman.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I was talking to a team this week about Seth Jones, and I'm still trying to wrap my brain around it and process exactly what they were saying, but they seem to be casting a little doubt on his productivity moving forward. And it sounds funny to say, this is a guy that's 26. He's normally in fantastic shape. Like, you can't play 26 minutes a night the last 3 seasons without being in that unbelievable shape. But I think some teams were curious, at least in the one that I talked to, and I'll pass this along freely. And I don't think they're trying to cast any sort of shadow on Seth Jones and whatever he brings back. It's going to be a massive haul for Columbus. But they were saying they think that he's on the back nine, that they're going to start to see perhaps a little bit of a drop off quicker than, maybe some other players that are out there, and he may not be worth exactly what he ends up getting. I don't know how you make that determination. I mean, you can look at his point productivity, and obviously it's gone a little bit downhill, but 26 years old, like he's right in the prime of his career.
Yeah. And the other thing I would caution that for 2 reasons. Number one, you look at the last 17 months of NHL, it's been in a pandemic, right? In a bubble, and different players are going to react differently to that. There's no fans. There's so many other things that go into it that, and players now, Frank, are like, we're seeing players maintain their peak years longer than we ever have before because they're in great shape. So I would probably disagree with that.
I hesitated even sharing it because I'm like, this doesn't look to me at all or feel like a player at all that has any part of that drop off coming anytime soon.
Yeah. Well, hey, maybe we'll put that in with producer Ty now for buy or sell.
Yeah, save that clip
when the Seth Jones deal gets done. As we welcome in producer Ty for another stirring rendition of buy or sell.
Yes, I've been working on my questions hard all week, losing sleep over these next 5 I'm about to throw at you guys.
Oh boy.
As always, Buy or Sell is brought to you by Jock Market. Check them out, jockmkt.com. Find them on your app store as well. That promo code DFO50 gets you a $50 deposit bonus. It's U.S. Open weekend. You know me, I'm a big fan of golf majors, and I'm a big fan of wagering on golf majors. So Jock Market is a great way to do that. The first question we got here, the GM of the Year award, had some interesting debates around it. You have Zito, you have Bergevin, you have Lamoriello. I'm going to say Zito should be the winner of this award. Frank, are you buying? And if you're selling, you got to tell me who you would have as the winner.
I am buying. I think the moves that Bill Zito made, I think just really fit this team. I think he had an idea of what he wanted to go after. You look at some of the additions, even at the trade deadline, people were saying, 2 second-round picks for Sam Bennett. What's going on there? And then he comes in and has the run that he did. I think there were some rocky moments for Bill Zito, some learning experiences. I think the Keith Yandel situation probably spiraled out of control in a way in the beginning of the season that it didn't need to. So I don't think that it was a year without some hiccups, but I think that he put the Florida Panthers back on the map, or at least helped.
Yeah, I'm buying all the way. I just look at the amount of moves he made and what worked. Like when you can sign Verhaeghe Duclair, and Wenberg for a total of like $5 million and get all the points that you got from those guys. That in itself, because to me, the GM's job is to make his team better and via trades. And then the Sam Bennett trade was cool. Even Nunavara, they gave a fourth rounder, and that guy's, a regular top 6 defenseman for you every night, all season long. He's not flashy, but he fills a role on your team. And, even they went out and got Gusev, and I know he didn't do much in the playoffs, but down the stretch, he had 5 points in 11 games. Like every big move,
the Hornquist deal as well.
Yeah. Every big move they made seemed to work. But I will say this, Mark Bergevin as a GM, when you look at the Anderson trade, you look at the Edmondson signing, you look at the Toffoli signing, like those are 3 massive impacts for your team. So I think he's there. I saw a lot of people saying, well, Brisebois should get it. And I'm like, well, why? Because he convinced Kucherov to have the surgery.
Wait until December. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So I don't like, this is about I think it should be the regular season, because usually it's always guys who are in the conference final. Yeah. And the fact that Bill Zito is in this year and he's not in the conference final
says a lot about what people thought about his year.
So I would go with him, but Bergevin's moves, and I know Bergevin is on the hot seat in Montreal, they've paid off for sure.
100%. Feels like we're starting to get, maybe the ball rolling on a potential Jack Eichel trade, starting to hear about teams involved and all that. I'm going to say Eichel traded before the Stanley Cup is handed out. Jason, you buying or selling?
I'm selling. I don't, it is rare to see massive trades during the Cup finals. Usually Gary frowns upon those type announcements. I know you can do it as long as it's not on a game day, but historically, usually we see big deals the week right before the draft. I think if you're Buffalo and you're the GM, you're going to want to be playing off those other teams, because Jack Eichel's a pretty big name, and you're going to want as much time as you can to make them think. So I will sell.
I'm going to sell. Tyler, I thought you said you were working on these questions all week long. Come on. That's an easy sell. Not before the Cup final. Okay. Too many teams are still holding meetings. I think it's like, right before the draft.
Although, see, before the draft, you could have had me thinking, because look at the Subban and Weber and the Hall trades. Those happened after the draft. So there is that small chance that, because I don't know if a first rounder in this year's draft is like the crucial piece of that Eichel deal.
Doesn't Buffalo think they have an edge or something in this year's draft? All right. One of the teams we're hearing involved in the Eichel talk is the Anaheim Ducks. Also here in the LA Kings, potentially. Sounds like it could be a busy summer in California. I'm going to say that the Ducks are going to be the busiest club this summer out of the 3 California teams. Frank, you buying or selling?
I'm buying. I think Bob Murray knows that this rebuild hasn't gone as quickly as he might have expected. I think that the clock is ticking, and I think that he's someone that wants to make big moves. Now, whether he can pull them off or not is a different story, but I think there's certainly an appetite to do so.
Now, Ty, this is a good question, because I think all 3 of these teams might be in the top 5 or 6 busy, because Doug Wilson and the San Jose Sharks, like, they're either going to decide we're going for it one last time. They got to get a goalie. No question.
Need a goalie.
Or if they don't get that, all of a sudden he might move off like one of his big defensemen, right? Like, they've got so much money on the back end.
Who's taking one of them?
Well, Brent Burns still has value in my eyes. No question about it. Brent Burns can play. I watch a lot of
If you're Seattle, do you take Brent Burns?
Well, I don't think they would expose Brett. Like, that would be awful for you can't lose Brett Burns for nothing. You've got to find a way.
That contract suddenly gives you the space you need to do other things.
Yeah, but he's the best of the 3. Right? You got to try to convince Vlasic to waive it, and then I don't think they'll take him. But Brent Burns, if you lost Brent Burns for nothing just to free up cap space, like he's not a guy who's not producing. So I wouldn't do that. But I'm going to say I'm going to sell and say the LA Kings. I think this is the year the LA Kings. They're going to make a big move, and I'm going to go with the LA Kings.
Let's come up to Canada here, where a similar question. I think there'll be a lot of Canadian teams looking to make some changes, but I'll say the Edmonton Oilers will be the busiest of all the Canadian teams this offseason. Jason, you buying or selling?
I guess by sheer volume of moves, I'll say yes, because right now there's Nugent Hopkins, Larsen, and Barrie, and Smith that are UFAs. Like, they got to sign at least, like, I think Smith's the most likely one, but they got to sign at least 1, if not 2 of those free agents, if they can, forwards. Then they got to fill out the rest of their roster. But when it comes to major moves, I still have a sneaking suspicion the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to try to do something. Because what are they going to do with their goaltender? Because I don't think Jack Campbell's a starting goaltender. I think he's a really good story. I don't think he's a guy who can take it to the conference final or to the final. So I think in quantity of moves, it'll be Edmonton. But I don't. So does that? I guess that qualifies for busiest. But I don't know if they'll make the biggest splash.
I think the biggest splash. I'm gonna sell. You didn't even mention two of the other fascinating teams this summer, Calgary and Vancouver. I mean, I think much like Edmonton, this is a summer that they've been waiting for. Vancouver's in the same boat. Obviously, they need to get their deals done with Pettersson and Hughes, but I think they're a team that, could also potentially be in buyout territory, make a move to free up some cap space and then, improve their team and Calgary as well. We've been saying for a while now that it certainly appears that there's no management change coming, that there's going to be a significant change to the core of that team. So in terms of quality over quantity, I would say that, busiest might be in terms of reinventing the core. Calgary is certainly in that mix.
Last one for you here. You touched on Brent Burns potentially to the Kraken. Just on the topic of Seattle, I'm going to say they will land a top free agent this offseason. And I won't throw a name attached to it or anything, but I'll say sort of one of the consensus top 5, 6, 7 free agents this year.
Oh,
one
like
of them
Nuge?
will find a way. One of them will find a way to go to Seattle. Frank, I'll let you go first then. You buying or selling?
I'm buying. I think a lot of people saw how, before, 15, 20 years ago when the NHL last expanded, there was like this dread of going to an expansion team because of how poorly that team was expected to do on the ice. You saw in Vegas, everything changed. That team, hit the ice running. And not only that, but what a fantastic market to live in. I think Seattle has a lot of the same reputation. The fan base is juiced up, waiting list for tickets. That arena is going to be unbelievable, and it's a world-class city. So you add all those things up, plus, a smart management group. I think there's lots of people that are going to be intrigued, especially with a pretty deep free agent class this year. I think there's going to be lots of interest to go to Seattle.
Yeah, I think the flat cap is definitely helping Seattle. I'm reading a book right now called The Psychology of Money. And one of the big things is how a lot of people see things that happened in the past, so they want to mirror it. In a lot of cases, that's not the best path. And so while Vegas had a lot of success, and I'm hearing, having had conversations, the Seattle ownership groups feel like, hey, we're going to be just as competitive as Vegas. Not necessarily make it to the Stanley Cup final in the first year, but that's their goal. So I think they will go out and spend, and I think they will be in a position to offer more money and term than some other teams are willing to do on their free agents. So that'll get them the players they want. But it's funny, if you look at Vegas, their path didn't go after big signing free agents, right? They made some astute trades. So it, in theory, would be a little bit different. I think they're going to land one, Tyler. I'm not necessarily certain it's going to be the best decision.
There you go. Those are your 5. That is buy or sell, brought to you by Jock Market. Again, jockmkt.com, and that promo code is DFO50.
You redeemed yourself, Ty. Those are some good questions I like. Now, Frank, before we go quickly, see the Vancouver Canucks, I agree with you. They'll make big moves with they got to re-sign Pettersson and Hughes. Although I'm not sure they're going to be as long-term contracts as some people suggest, because see, I think Vancouver's 1 year away from being they still got some guys on contracts that they don't like. And, maybe they can buy out one of them, but I'm interested about Vancouver. Like, I think Vancouver has to try to go bargain hunting like Bill Zito did, right? And find those diamonds in the rough for cheap and hope that can get you through till next summer when they have more cap flexibility.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, look, every team with a flat cap needs to go bargain hunting for the most part.
Yeah.
I mean, there's very few teams that have ample cap space to do whatever they please. So, I agree. I think they have a decent foundation there. We've talked about this in the past, like with how well Demko played this year, with Hughes on the back end and Horvat as captain driving the bus, and then Pettersson when he's healthy. Like, they have all the foundational, boxes checked off. Now it's about surrounding that group with the proper talent. And I think they have some of it towards the top end, but they don't have the depth towards the bottom end to really compete. And so their defense is really what, that's where your eye and focus needs to be. Is they made a bet last year that they could have some young guys step in and play more minutes. That didn't work out. And now they're going to need to properly surround that group.
Well, we've got Tampa, and they're leading their series, and I think they're kind of on the way to what we expected to happen. Montreal and Vegas, we will have game 3 tonight in Montreal. They got 1,000 extra fans. It's up to 3,500, and I'm curious to see how Vegas, after being in a madhouse now, kind of goes back. And you heard Brad Larsen talk about it in Chicago. It's kind of a thud after the anthem because it wasn't the same. I wonder if Montreal has a little bit of home ice advantage with a smaller crowd because they're used to it, where Vegas, it might, and Vegas has struggled, Frank, in the first 10 minutes in both games this series, and really, for, the first 10 minutes of a lot of games. I wonder how much that impacts this series now.
Yeah, I hadn't really considered that or given that much thought. I will say, though, coming off of that loss, that I think you're going to see a different intensity from Vegas right off the hop. And so I think that was really what was missing in game 2. They didn't have that same juice that they had almost every night in the Colorado series, absent game 1. And so I think you're going to see that return and maybe negate some of, whatever that may exist in that quieter environment.
I look forward to a busy weekend of NHL conference final playoffs. And of course, we got another edition of the pod coming up on Monday. Have a great weekend, Frank. We'll talk to you then.
Thanks for listening to the DFO Rundown with Seravalli and Gregor. Keep it locked on dailyfaceoff.com and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from to never miss an episode.